Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paula Perry, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. Before we get started, we want to give a very special thank you to the City of Brampton for making today's event possible. Your commitment to industry and local businesses has been an inspiration, and it is so important now more than ever as we are trying to navigate through reopening for business. We're all in this together, and we need to continue to share information and learning like this so we can get out of this together. So today we are focusing on patio protocol. As we prepare to come out of lockdown, hopefully on June the 2nd, we wanted to give you enough time and enough learning to plan properly so that we can operate safely and within the bylaws when it's safe for all of us to do so. So today we're going to hear from two leaders. First, Louise Aubin, who's the Director of Health Protection, Public Health, Health Services for the region of Peel, and Paul Morrison, the Director of Enforcement and Bylaw Services for the City of Brampton. How today's webinar will work, is we will hear from a presentation from each of our speakers right after the other. And then we will leave ample time at the end of this webinar for a question and answer period so that both of our speakers will be able to answer any questions that come up. So if at any time throughout either or both of the presentations you have a question for one of our speakers, please do put it in the chat box at the bottom of your screen, and one of our moderators will take in those questions, and we will do our best to make sure that all or as many questions as we can will get answered at the end of today's webinar. So to start off today, I would like to introduce to you Councillor Vicente. Regional Councillor Paul Vicente represents Wards 1 and 5. He is the Vice Chair of Economic Development and Culture, and he is the co-chair of the Mayor's Economic Support Task Force. He has dedicated himself to the city and believes strongly that informed citizenry and routine consultation result in better decisions. He's thrilled to be here with us today, and we are very thrilled to have him. Please welcome Councillor Vicente.
Thank you very much, Paula, and good afternoon, and welcome everyone to Brampton's Patio Program webinar. I am Regional Councillor Paul Vicente for Wards 1 and 5, and I'm pleased that so many of you have taken the time to join us here today. We know that the restaurant and tourism sectors in Canada have been hit hardest by the pandemic, and that they will likely be the last sectors to recover. Here in Peel Region, by the time June 2nd comes, the end of the current stay-at-home order, restaurants will be just 3 days short of 1 year. That's 362 days since being able to host diners inside your restaurants. We have data from Restaurants Canada showing that 86% of Ontario's restaurants are still operating at a loss, barely scraping by, now more than ever in a year into this pandemic. And additionally, 7 out of 10 restaurant operators expect that they'll need at least a year to return to profitability. So we all know that there's a long road ahead, and the City of Brampton will continue to offer support to you through our support local marketing campaigns, sharing information with you, the services of our Brampton Entrepreneur Center, and webinars such as this one that aim to provide practical guidance for your smooth patio operations. We know that patios can't be open until the current stay-at-home order has ended. So now is the time for all of us to fully understand the requirements for operating a patio during the pandemic. As Paula mentioned, we are really fortunate to have two very knowledgeable speakers with us today. Louise Aubin from the Peel Public Health, who will speak to patio guidelines, and Paul Morrison from the City of Brampton bylaw, who will provide information on patio structures and their requirements as set out in our city bylaws. So let's get started. Please note that there will be time after the presentations to ask questions. And so now I'm happy to turn the program over to Louise, who will cover the public health guidelines. Louise, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Councillor Vicente. I'm going to jump in first. I have my bossy pants on today, so I'm going to jump in. Thank you so much for being with us. I just want to give you a proper bio, a proper introduction, Louise. So I want to thank Councillor Vicente for making the time to be with us today. We really appreciate it, and your words meant a lot, so thank you. So without further ado, as Councillor Vicente said, we're going to be joined by Louise Aubin. She's the Director for Health Protection Division for the Peel Public Health, and her responsibilities include food and water safety programs, public health hazard investigations, the prevention and management of vector-borne diseases, and tobacco control. Please welcome Louise Aubin.
Great. Thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you, Councillor Vassetti, for the warm welcome. Today, I want to give you a sense of what's going on with the COVID-19 situation in Peel and some of the provincial measures that are currently in place. The information that I'm going to show will show that we're at a critical point in the third wave of the pandemic, and that we really need to be careful and consider the actions we take as we move forward. So just very quickly, what I'm going to cover is just a slide on vaccination, because I know there's lots of questions out there about vaccination, the COVID trends in Peel, provincial measures in place. I'm going to touch very quickly on a Section 22 class order for workplaces that Peel Public Health has, and then talking about taking care of our community and available resources. So just very quickly, as I said, I know vaccination is top of mind for a lot of people, and the purpose of this webinar is really to talk about patios, but just thought we would touch on this very, very quickly. So with respect to vaccination information, people who work in restaurants are eligible to be vaccinated. Information is up on our website at Peel Public Health, and the information that you can find there are who is eligible, where to go to get a vaccine, how to book an appointment, what is available through the region of Peel. There is also a new standby list that has just been created. All the eligibility rules still apply, but at the end of the day, if there's vaccine that is unused, we'd rather see it be used for people rather than go to waste. So people will be randomly contacted from that list to come in and to be vaccinated. And one of the criteria is that you can be at the clinic within 15 to 30 minutes, and it must be your first dose of vaccine. Just to give you a sense of where we are in the vaccination, this slide shows the data from May 13th. We've administered just under 800,000 doses of vaccine, which is tremendous. And around 53% of adults in Peel have been vaccinated. And that represents about 42% of the entire population for Peel. So tremendous work has been happening with vaccination. I was lucky enough to be at the Doses After Dark vaccination this past weekend, and just enormous amount of energy on that front. So then moving on to COVID in Peel, as of May 17th, we have had 105,000 cases in Peel, which is an enormous burden of illness to deal with. COVID continues to rage in Peel, and the scope of the response has been absolutely staggering. I know it's been a long haul for the restaurant community and been really challenging, but wanted to lay the context so that people understand what the scope of the situation that we're dealing with. This slide shows the cases in Peel by date. The upper box shows the number of cases that have happened since March 2020. And you can see over time the successive waves that have happened. The red bar lines in this graph also show the impact of the variants that have come in the later waves, and just how much of a driver they've been with respect to COVID in the region of Peel. The bottom graph I thought would also be of interest to you. So the framework for reopening Ontario is color-coded, and there are thresholds associated with it with respect to cases. The red zone is a threshold of 40 cases per 100,000, and the region of Peel is currently sitting at around 297 cases per 100,000. This data was pulled for May 17th, so it is very recent. I'm really happy to say the cases are going in the right direction, and we're making progress on it, partially due to vaccination and partially due to the public health measures. But we do still have some way to go to get back into the framework and the thresholds that are announced by the province. So going back to what Councillor Vincente had stated, the provincial declaration of emergency and the province-wide stay-at-home order has been extended until at least June 2nd, 2021. In order to protect Peel, additional public health measures are necessary and include the measures like masking, like physical distancing, et cetera. And in order to protect Peel, there's been a need to close businesses in high-risk sectors, including fitness activities, personal care, and indoor and outdoor dining. We are constantly monitoring the regulations, and the wording of at least till June 1st or June 2nd, we are monitoring closely. We're also not sure if, as we start to reopen, whether there will be changes in the regulations as people get more, as we get more and more of the population vaccinated, whether requirements are going to change as we go forward. I also did want to draw your attention to the Section 22 workplace order that Peel Public Health has put into place. So under the Health Protection and Promotion Act, there are powers under the Section 22 to take action when needed if there's a threat of illness. And with respect to the Section 22, it outlines measures that workplaces must implement both through the Ontario regulations, but also local regulations. It outlines sector-specific pieces that need to happen as well. And one thing that I did want to draw your attention to is the region of Peel has had 493 outbreaks in total since the pandemic has started, including 37 in food and beverage services, despite the fact that indoor and outdoor dining have not been in place. So it has been a bit of a challenge for us to continue to move forward. There is an additional Section 22 order that is in place that I need to draw your attention to as well, that involves the requirement to self-isolate in the event of a positive test for COVID. Under the Section 22 workplace, there are steps in it that must be followed in the event of somebody becoming ill. So if somebody reports to work and they have symptoms, they should be sent home, told to self-isolate and to get tested. And one of the key messages that we would like to share is that staff should not be coming to work or should not be working if they are sick. In the event that there is one positive work case within the workplace, the person should be sent home. There should be a discussion about who their close contacts were in the workplace, and they should be sent home as well. All are required to self-isolate. If there are 2 or more cases in the workplace within a 14-day period, so within a 2-week period, under the Section 22, there's a requirement to notify Peel Public Health, as well the Workplace Safety Insurance Board and the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Labor, Skills, Training, Development should be notified as well that there are cases within that workplace. If the cluster continues and there are 5 or more positive workplaces within the workplace within 14 days, this may result in a full or partial closure of the premise for 10 days. Our staff will work with you to understand what the circumstances are, how those cases were acquired, whether they are workplace related or happening through community spread. But we will work with you as we go through with it. All of the information about the workplace Section 22 can be found on our website at peelregion.ca/coronavirus/business. So with respect to how to protect yourself and others within the workplace, there are key actions that we recommend, including wear a mask, washing your hands, getting vaccinated, staying at home if you're ill, getting tested if you're ill, physically distancing. And there is a toolkit that's available from Peel Public Health on our website that you can use to promote good workplace practices within your workplace. Our website also has a number of resources that are available to you, and we update them depending on what the regulation changes are and where we are in the framework. So the text box that's up on the slide right now outlines information for restaurant, bars, food and drink establishments, mobile food premises like food trucks and et cetera, what can be done currently. If we move into different colors of the framework, this information is updated regularly, so you can go to it. One thing that I would like to flag too is that all workplaces are required to have a safety plan under the regulations, and there are links to how to create a safety plan and what things need to be considered as part of it. Our website also has a host of other information that's available, social supports for mental well-being, informations about self-isolating housing program if it's needed, financial supports for both employers and employees, information on how to get free rapid testing kits for employees reporting to work, as well as sector-specific guidance for food establishments. And so that takes me to the end of my portion of the presentation. I want to thank all of you for your ongoing commitment to protecting the community. I can't imagine how difficult it must have been over the last couple of months, and we really look forward to working with you as the restaurant sector starts to reopen, as patios start to reopen. So with that, I will stop and hand it over to Paul to continue, or to Paula, sorry, to continue.
Thank you so much, Louise. That was so informative and helpful. And I want to just thank you and your team for all of the work that you've been doing over the last 14 months. I can't even imagine the stress it's put on all of you. And I know that you just were a part of a 36-hour vaccination site. And so the work that you're all doing to help get us out of this is so appreciated. So thank you for that presentation and your time. It's now my pleasure to welcome Paul Morrison. Paul was a member of the Hamilton Police Service for 36 years, where he held the position of superintendent. In August 2016, he accepted the position for the Director of Enforcement and Bylaw Services with the City of Brampton. He oversees the day-to-day operations of the division, which is comprised of 4 units. They include parking, bylaw enforcement, property standards, licensing enforcement, and administrative. So without further ado, please welcome Paul Morrison.
Thank you, Paula, for the introduction. Welcome to everybody who's in the crowd listening today. Hopefully, we're going to be informative. Louise had a very informative presentation. I hope you understood everything that she had to say, because it's important. From an enforcement perspective, we look at a couple of things. Before I start my slideshow, I just want to remind you that our focus is your protection when it comes to COVID and the transmission of the virus. And secondly, as it pertains to restaurants, the protection of your staff, yourself, and the people that attend your restaurants, their physical safety. So we're going to talk about both today. So a couple things I wanted to talk about today was the fact that we are in shutdown right now. So no dining permitted. Our expectation is June 2nd, we're going to go into the gray zone, or we're going to have a restricted gray zone. So we have to be concerned with, are we going to open, when are we going to open, and what are those conditions are going to be like? So we're anticipating all this will come out in the next couple of weeks, as Louise had said. But from an enforcement perspective, I just want to share a little bit with you. We work in partnerships. We don't just do the enforcement out of the bylaw enforcement detachment or division. We work with public health very closely with Louise and her people. When we talk about restaurants, dinings, we usually have a joint plan on how we're going to approach it. And when we do our enforcement, if it's a complex matter, we'll go together. We also have at our availability is the fire prevention officers. So from time to time, you'll see them going around, and really they participate in a surveillance program for the enforcement people. We are a staff of probably 43 officers in enforcement proper that go out and do the city over a 24/7 campaign. So we're not more than probably 6 or 7 during any 12-hour shift. So we need partners, and we have those partners in Louise. We have them in fire prevention who go out and they look at different aspects of patio and restaurant openings for us. We also are supported by the ministry's multi-agency task force who work from the provincial office, and they come into our city and they'll also look at COVID enforcement from their perspective. And they can involve Ministry of Labor, transport, they could involve other areas such as agriculture. All their inspectors are involved in that. So there's a lot of people looking at what goes on within our city and whether we're doing things right. The other thing about enforcement was we have to remember is since we're limited in our resources of people out on the street, bodies doing the inspections, sometimes we don't get to events as timely as people think we should. When you call, or somebody calls us to complain, there's a belief that we're going to respond immediately. Sometimes that could be a couple hours because calls for service are stacking up. And I can tell you typically for COVID calls, we are probably 60 calls left at the end of every shift that will roll into the next shift for officers to get to. So we are very busy. The other piece that is we're acting on a complaint-driven process right now. So we're not out proactively as much looking for your violations as we are reactively responding to complaints about violations at establishments. So when we attend, we've either driven by and seen something that is glaring to us that needs it being addressed, or we've been sent there as part of a complaint. So we're not coming in out of just driving by to look at details of your safety plan, etc. We expect you to have those in order, but we will stop by if we see something glaring. So those are important pieces for us. The other thing is that you have to remember is perception is not reality in every case. So quite often we'll get calls about a perceived infraction. So you have your restaurant open, you have outside dining, people are attending and will attend. I hope that you understand that we're not there to over enforce you. Lots of times people have said, I think there's too many people out on the dining room patio. I think there's too many people congregating at the host desk. I think there are too many people at a table. We have to respond to those. We can't just listen to the complaint and say, oh, we don't really think you have enough evidence there. We do respond. So when our officers come, we expect that you would understand we come in a very cooperative, educational process. So please take that into mind when we do attend, because public perception is quite often different than reality. So when we do come under the gray zone, and hopefully that will be on June 2nd, a couple things we look for to support public health are, what is your capacity or your overcapacity? The province will really set down on how many people you could have in your facility or your building at any given time. And we don't know. That will change. So we're waiting for June 2nd to come out. The screening. Do you have the proper screenage? The signage is important to us. That is one of the first things we look for. Are people made aware of what they have to do and what conditions they can come into the establishment based on, and what COVID screening questions are required? So we look at all that. The safety plan, when we first started out with that, people thought it wasn't as important as it is. But we have lodged probably 10 or 12 charges so far because companies and establishments don't have a proper safety plan. And it's really important that you follow those procedures, because if anything negative happens within your environment, we're going to be asking for the safety plan, and it might be a court document. So you have to remember that it's important to have a really good safety plan. As we all know, you have hours of operation, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. There are certain exceptions, and those will change when the ministry puts out their new regulations. And lineups, no different than any other business, 2 meters apart, wearing masks. We recommend that everybody wear a mask, but that would be dependent in the lineup, a mask and goggles if you have them. So those are things to consider as well. Records, you have to maintain records for everybody who comes. And this has bounced around a little bit. At one time, it was just one party in the group, but it's for all patrons, no matter who it is. So we can conduct good contact tracing for public health. And once again, those medical records really only go to the medical officer health. We don't even get to see them in bylaw. We just know that they have to be there. And if they are there, they can be produced to public health. So those are important pieces. So outside, what can you do outside? Well, no buffets. That goes without saying. If you want to prepare the food and serve it such, and I use Harvey's as an example, they prepare your food behind the screen, they hand it to you. That's as close as to buffet service as you can get, where you can't actually touch the food. And Louise can answer questions for that a little later on. Patrons have to be seated. You can't have that mingling, that standing up, that bar scene atmosphere anymore. People have to be in their seat and stay to their seat unless they have the exceptions. And the exceptions include going to the washroom, entering and exiting the restaurant, placing or picking up orders, or paying. So there's conditions that where you can get up and go around. Same household, unless you live alone or caregiver. And that doesn't mean a family of two can go and sit at a table and then have their father come because he's a widower, and then maybe have the mother of the other side of the family come because she's a widower, and start adding onto a big table. Our expectation is probably one, and I'll get Louise to clarify that for you a little later on, but one family, one extra person is what we're expecting. So you can't have 5 separate people from 5 single households all at the same table. There's just too much of a possibility of transmission. Distancing and barriers between tables. When patrons sit, there's an expectation they'll be looking for those, and there's certainly an expectation you'll be providing them. So people will always ask, is that 2 meters? Am I farther enough away from another table? Where's my barrier? And you should be able to answer those questions, and it really should be in your safety plan as well. And then limiting the number of patrons that can maintain 2 meters distance. If you don't have the capacity in it and you can't maintain that, even if the number says you can have more in your building, you have to reduce. The 2 meters is the most critical part of this. You have to have that distance between you. These are really important ones. The structures themselves, and I'm speaking on behalf of the buildings department for this one here, is we see so many makeshift structures out there. They're popping up all over right now, and they're comprised of all sorts of materials. And compounding that is the ability to get these structures and materials has become more difficult and way more costly than even it was a year ago. So people are improvising, and we ask if you improvise on the side of safety. Really, when we talked about earlier, the 2 pieces of safety here is the COVID, the transmission of the virus, and the safety for the people using the facilities. I actually use the moniker for myself, cutting corners can cut lives short. So you have to remember that. If you want to do something that really isn't to what is prescribed regulation or standard, you're jeopardizing somebody's safety, yours, your staff, and people entering your restaurant. So let's focus on that as we move forward. 2 sides open on a table, on a tent. You always have to have that. And that's really for egress and for the ventilation. So that's an important piece. The other piece is the walls can't be blocked by impermeable physical barriers. It can't have such a rigid structure that it has now become a building as opposed to a temporary structure. And people have become really creative on what they can build out there and the materials they use. Unfortunately, once it becomes that almost set building, we have to step in. The roof, if it's open or retractable, then you only need one side of the building open, and that lets the ventilation out so you can have the 3 sides covered. And once again, you can't block the walls, etc., with permeable and physical barriers. During the construction of that, one thing that we've seen a lot in the fall when buildings and structures were done is the weather really impacted them. So we saw tents blown over, walls blown down, roofs blown off. So we really got to make sure you build those safely. Now I'm thinking about, we're getting into a different type of season. We're not getting into those hard, cold winds. We're getting into driving rain, thunderstorms, etc. So really put a mind to that when you build your structure. The problem with that is if you have a structure and it leaks and you have a capacity for your patrons and the rain starts coming down hard, where are you going to put those people? How are you going to move them out? You should have a plan for that too, because they can happen really quickly. You can have a quick storm and you'll have to accommodate for that. So keep that in mind when you build your structures. Liquor being sold 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. That's outside of what we normally have. The government has recognized that this is a hard time for all business establishments. So as restaurateurs, you now know you can have a little bit of leeway there, but consumption 10 p.m. to 9 a.m. can't have it. Tables cleared, etc. These are all Liquor License Act infractions, and that will be governed by the AGCO and Regional Police, not an enforcement bylaw City of Brampton issue, but I'm just reminding you. And then once again, you have to make sure your place is clean, your place of business is clean, including the washrooms, etc. When people go around doing that, there's almost a reassurance by the patron, for the patron, that you're doing things properly. That was one of the fine details. When they see you cleaning, they appreciate that. And we get that feedback quite often. So the temporary outdoor patio extensions bylaw, I can tell you, your ECDF people are working so hard for you in this city of Brampton. I've never seen anything like it. They're putting all their energy and time into trying to open up and trying to open safely and try to provide you with all the resources they can. Laura Lucasic and her people, Claire Burnett, her whole team, very much into this. And when you have questions, please ask them. But right now, we're valid until January 2022. As long as you have a valid business license and you're registered to operate. I can tell you that it has been interesting through the patio extension program that we found that there are some businesses that don't have or didn't renew their business licenses. This isn't a time for us to give a grace on that, in the sense that you have to have it operate within the city. If you don't, it really puts the legitimate businesses at a disadvantage, because that's something a condition you don't have to have. So we ask you that you do that. And if you know somebody who isn't doing it, we also ask you to let us know. The outdoor food cooking, preparation, drink, etc., not permitted, as we all know. You can't do it. It's not in a safe format. So we're not allowing it. So we know that you need a permit required for your patio extension. I believe the turnaround is quite quick. The teams at ECDEV are really being able to spin them around. I get emails every day. Couple of days, half a day has been the turnarounds. We take a look at your plans, etc. We vet them through. They just don't go to ECDEV. They do go through a lot of different agencies. I see them, fire see them, other buildings see them, and we all have input on whether we feel it's safe or not. And I'll tell you, generally, most of them are very safe and good, well thought out plans. So I applaud you for that. There is a website you can go to. The Brampton website is very detailed on all the details you need to have a patio extension permit, and how to get it and how to safely conduct it. So please go to that website, ask the questions, and you can always ask a question through the website. People will get back to you pretty quickly. So once again, the outside closures, fully enclosed ones, are not permitted. This is where we get into I had spoke earlier about the materials used to build it. I've seen them made out of plastic and wood, which is highly flammable. We'll make you take that down under the zoning legislation. We'll also make you remove it completely from the site. It has to be anchored well, the wind, etc., the uplift. Those are all important things. So you please take that into consideration. We don't want you to put an expense in there for nothing, for us to come in and make you remove it. So you have to put even a more expensive facility in. So please, we'll work with you on that. A little plug for the fire department. They're very concerned about how you heat that. Thankfully, we're getting into a season now where you're probably going to have less heat in there required, because the weather is warming up, etc. Your coverings will be open a little bit more, so the ventilation will be there as well. So we're not as concerned about that. But if you do have fuel-fired heating, you have to make sure they come to standards. You have to make sure that you can't be knocked over, the type of fuel you're using. Those are all concerns for us. And did you leave them out overnight in an unsafe position? If you have a propane heater and it's got a valve, remember, anybody walking by can ruin your business by turning that valve on and inappropriately using that equipment. So those are things that you have to consider. Like I said, we're into a season where it's not so concerning for us, but you still might have some sort of lighting system outdoor or candles on the table. Still take a look at that and make sure it's safe. Next slide, please. So accessibility remains important to us. We also look at how much space you use in the parking. So in the permit process, it'll be looked at where you're going to put your structure and how it's going to impact the route around it. So we always look at, we have to have the accessible parking spaces in the area that you have your building. So those will maintain as always. We'll always enforce those. So in the city of Brampton, the enforcement division does all public parking enforcement, but on private property, private contractors do it for the mall owners and the store owners, etc. But we will always take the opportunity to enforce the accessible parking as a City of Brampton employee. So we'll come on to those private spaces and ticket there. So, and we are and we have been, because we get lots of complaints by people requiring those spots. Fire routes, there's no extension. Right now we have a hold on timed parking offenses, the 2 to 6 in the evening, the 3 hours until we get out of the stay-at-home order. I've put a hold on that. Once we get back into gray, I'm going to take the hold off and we will start enforcing again. But fire routes are continuous. We haven't stopped doing this, and we will continue to do that in the business areas as well. Residential dwellings, your structure's got to stay 12 meters from a residential dwelling, and that's to give them the courtesy of not having too much noise, the smell of the food, and the distraction of foot traffic, et cetera, in large crowds. And lastly, in neighborhood businesses, you can extend your patio across the front of a neighborhood business, but you must have the permission to do that, and it must be in your patio plan that you submit with DecDev. So those are important things to remember. So wrapping it all up, there are a lot of moving parts here. There's a lot of things that concern yourself. You're going to do it for the safety of your staff, yourself, the community. And the last thing I want to let you know is enforcement, we're not coming to enforce right away. Most times we come to educate. So please understand that. We're coming on a very open and positive visit to your place. We'll work with where we can with you, but there are some things we just can't not enforce, but mostly we educate in the first round, hopefully gaining your compliance. So I thank you. Paula, thank you for the time, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Paul. That was so informative. There's so much good information in there. And thank you to you and your teams who are constantly keeping us up to speed with all this ever-changing information. So this has been wonderful. So we are now at the audience question and answer period of the webinar. So I'm going to invite Louise and Paul back up on screen so we can take some of your questions. So I know that there are many throughout the chat. That's great. Thank you both so much for taking the time. Those presentations were amazing. Before we start, Louise, Paul kind of mentioned in some of his presentations that you might be able to speak a bit more about perhaps combining households at outdoor dining or serving at buffet. Well, there's not buffets, but kind of touching food. Could you maybe speak on that before we jump into the questions?
Sure, absolutely. I'll start with the buffet question. The concern about buffets is really around the congregation of people coming together, standing close, elbow to elbow as they're serving food. They're leaning in, they're breathing in each other's breathing zone. And so that's the reason why buffets are not permitted. We've been asked too about what if we have staff standing behind a table with warming dishes or so on and serving people. Again, it's that proximity. We're trying to limit people coming together. So that was the concern with respect to that. The other question about ensuring that one household is seated per table. That's actually part of a larger question, and it's around the keeping of logs and tracing and so on. What we're trying to achieve with that piece is trying to limit the contact of groups of people amongst each other and making sure that the only people that you are being exposed to, other than the transient exposure of your server as they're coming in and out, are members of your household. With respect to dining, there is a requirement to keep logs of people who have come in, where they're sitting, all that kind of stuff, in the event that there is an outbreak and we do need to go in and do contact tracing. So with respect to the household, when a group of people arrive at the front, our advice is to, at that point, record the information of the people who have come forward. And we've seen many cases where the log is just somebody has scribbled down a name and there's no further information provided. Having a robust log where you've got the name, telephone number, email address, and you can ask for place of address at that point and it's applied to everybody who's coming to the door. So you're not singling out one group or making people feel uncomfortable, because being in the hospitality industry. You want people to feel comfortable. You want a welcoming environment, those pieces there. So having a robust process in place that every group is being asked for will help with that. Will people still try to circumvent the rules? It's not outside the realm of possibility, but at least trying to be as robust as we possibly can with those logs. And in the event that there is an outbreak, from a public health perspective, they're invaluable. So we thank you for taking the time to do that. It really is important for us.
Thank you so much, Louise. And I'm so glad you touched on that point of that balance of safety and also hospitality, because that's what we're trying to be warm and inviting and invite people to our patios, to our restaurants. So finding that balance is always so key. So thank you for saying that. Paul, question for you. In your presentation, you brought up safety plans quite a bit. Is there like a standard at the city that people can use to build their safety plan off of, or what are you looking at when you're referencing the safety plan? What should restaurant owners be thinking about when putting that together?
Well, Louise, did you want to answer that because you are more tuned?
Sure.
Oh, sure. Great.
Sure. So with respect to the safety plans, they are required under the regulations. There is if you Google Province of Ontario COVID safety plan, there is actually a provincial template that will help a restaurant owner or a business owner work through the various aspects of what they should be looking at. And it looks at things like screening, masking, physical distancing, record keeping, all those different pieces that are part of it. So that template is available. It's quite easy to go through. It won't take days to put it together. It's fairly straightforward, and you just have to follow the prompts that they put you through.
That's wonderful. Could you repeat where people could find that? Sorry, you mentioned a search.
Sure. So unfortunately, I don't have the website off the top of my head.
That's
but
okay.
if you Google Province of Ontario COVID workplace safety plans, it will come up.
The template comes up. That's wonderful. Okay, that's great. Well, you know what? Now I'm going to throw it over to our chat moderator, Hannah, who's been taking all of the questions. So Hannah, if you are ready to throw on your microphone, we're ready to hear these questions.
Wonderful. So we'll actually start with a question that extends from what you were just speaking about in regards to seating households together. Do you have any suggestions as to how servers should be confirming that patrons are from the same household when customers are perhaps not always as truthful as they could be?
So, Paul, would you like me to take that question?
Yeah, go ahead. I think this is going to be two of us on this one.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be a tag team effort. So with respect to the servers, from the time that the person comes to the front door of the premise, before they're even seated, there is a requirement to maintain logs of people who are coming. So at that point, capturing that information in that log that you have to require that a public health inspector or a medical officer of health can ask for right at that very point is a good way to capture whether they're from the same household or not. And to have it be standard practice as part of your safety plan, having signage, because it's required in every restaurant. People are getting more used to that requirement as they come forward, but just making sure that you're capturing the information, the person's name, their addresses, how many people are in the party, that kind of information can go a long way in terms of helping to gather that information. So with that, I'll tag team over to Paul if there's anything further that you'd like to add.
Absolutely. So when we approach a restaurant, there's different ways to find out whether it's legitimate that the people at the table should be at the table and not. And those are simple things like the factual ones, the driver's license, can you show ID from your place, etc. Because we can ask and verify that under the regulation. We have a right to ask. Otherwise, we also have a permission to charge if you're in violation. But the other ways we do it are the subtle questions. You know, you live in the same house? Yes, we live in the same house. And then you separate them a little bit and you just ask personal questions such as, is your bedroom on the right-hand side of the hallway as you go down, or is it on the left-hand side? There are all sorts of ways to have people take that pause and go, oh, maybe I should tell the truth. I don't actually live in that household by asking some of those questions. And there's a whole bunch of them. Is your bedroom upstairs? Is your downstairs? Or, you know what, is your living room paint color green or is it blue? Those are things that people don't typically prepare for when they're going to get questioned if they're sitting at a table legally. And Paul, I was terribly remiss in my presentation, so I want to catch one point up right now. Is
Of course.
we really, when I gave my presentation about buildings, I forgot to mention that we are the enforcement branch for other divisions within the city. So buildings is another one of our key partners. So when you want to know about structures, etc., Rick Kennard, who is the chief building officer for the city, Elizabeth Corzola, the manager. These are the people that we really turn to get clarification on questions of buildings, tents, structures, locations. They are the qualified experts. So when you're looking for an answer for that, also turn to the building department. They can answer those for you.
It's wonderful. Thank you both so much. Hannah, next question.
Yes. So what are the regulations for food trucks or outdoor cooking during stay-at-home orders and in gray zone? Can either operate now?
You want me to start, Paul?
Well, I'll start, and because
Okay.
it's really how to get to the food truck to the premise, and then you can deal with it after that. So in the city of Brampton, you have to be licensed. So you can't come and go to a site, set up and operate your food truck. So first of all, you have to have a license. And then what we would look for is to make sure that you follow all the public health recommendations. And Louise?
So yes, a food truck can operate. It can only be done for takeout, drive-through, which for a food truck, you won't do a drive-through or delivery. One of the things that we are concerned about with food trucks is people congregating. And so you've gone up to the food truck, you've bought your hamburger or hot dog or whatever it is. And we want to make sure that the food truck has set up a situation where people are not standing around in crowds eating. We do have guidance up on our website. I spoke to it during our presentation about things like setting up markers so that as people are waiting in line for food, that they're physically distanced, that they've got sufficient distance away. We also have guidance on our website about things like condiments and various other things like that. So again, people aren't putting their hands in, grabbing mustard packages putting their hand on containers where they're depressing stuff for mustard and congregating and those kinds of situations. So I would suggest going to our website, taking a look at what the guidance documents are with respect to the public health guidance for food trucks.
So can I just throw in there, Louise?
Absolutely.
And I may have missed it. And after you get your food, et cetera, the concern there is we don't have an informal pop-up a gathering to eat your food. You can't just get your food from the food truck, walk 15 feet, and 10 of you congregate in one other area and start eating it, because we consider that service than a social gathering, which would be an infraction in the regulation.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is addressed in the documents that we have up on our website.
Thank you both. And we've shared all the links that were in your presentation, Louise. We've put those in the chat, so those attending can easily access them. I love this tag team. This is cool.
We work in partnership.
It's perfect. It's perfect. Hannah, next question, please.
Yes, of course. So one of our attendees is interested in enhancing the sort of functionality of their bar's patio and also maybe installing outdoor televisions, landscaping. And they're wondering if you could provide direction as to where they could find subsidy support at either the federal or provincial level.
Wow, good question. You know what? I don't think that one's been asked before. I would have to refer you back to our economic development people, Laura Lukasik, all those team. They're really immersed into that area, and hopefully they can help you find the answer you're looking for. I'm sorry we don't have one right now.
No, thank you for that. So I think I see Laura's been active in the chat, which is wonderful. Hi, Laura. Thank you so much. And she's been dropping some really helpful links in there. So Laura, if you don't put you on the spot, I'm so sorry. But if there's a link to that, she's offering up that you can DM her or message her in this chat if you have questions, and she can point you in the direction of the Economic Development Department. So that's wonderful. Thank you. Hannah, I think we're ready for the next question.
Yes. One of our questions here is, I understand that the bylaw department is very busy and of course resources are limited, but what steps are being taken to perhaps reduce inaccurate complaints? I think Paul spoke to this a little bit in his presentation, but if that can be expanded upon.
Oh, absolutely. That's a great question again. One of the first things we do is our call takers who take the complaint have a series of questions they ask to validate the complaint, and we don't take anonymous complaining unless it's such a severe complaint that we can't ignore it. But in the most times, we ask you to give us your name. It's confidential. We don't give it out to anybody, but we want to make sure a couple things. One is who is reporting it is really reporting it for the right reasons, because anonymous complaining can be used in a detrimental fashion against a business. Just keep sending us to that business for no cause and make it look bad. And we don't want that. The other piece of that is if it becomes an incident where we need to contact you, clarify information, etc., we want to call you back. There's that. And for court, if we have to, you saw something, we might require somebody for a witness for court. So that's that first piece of validating the complaint. The second piece is when we go to these complaints, we don't approach it in a fashion of it is exactly what it is. We do in the sense that it's really severe. So we'll send an officer, maybe two officers if we think there's a safety issue. Then we'll go and engage the business and we'll ask the questions. Once again, I told you earlier in the presentation, we are all about education and then enforcement. And it may be we're there to educate you that you have somebody watching your business that really maybe not very supportive of it, and they're complaining, wrongly complaining. So we will work through that process. We understand that happens quite a bit. I'll bet you half of the complaints we get in the city, and we do tens of thousands, are public perception of something being done wrong that really is not in fact being done wrong. So we really take the lodging the complaint serious. We try to validate that. And then after a while, we become aware through metrics on the frequency of the complaints. So we're getting a lot of complaints at one restaurant or one business, et cetera. We'll look at it. And if we've been there 5 or 6 times and there's nothing, we'll start approaching it in the future as this may be vexatious or illegitimate complaint. And we won't make it high on the priority anymore. We'll get to it when we can get to it. And we'll make other things of safety more priority for us.
That makes absolute sense. Thank you, Paul. That's great. I'm just taking a look at the time. We're at 3 o'clock. So Hannah, I think we have one more question left. So let's we'll get that one in and then say goodbye.
Yes, someone is interested in understanding how they should be storing propane heaters at night. I would guess specifically related to propane safety handling.
Well, I can't speak for fire services, but I mean, we have to look at, did you lock up the structure? I know personally for us, we have propane at our building because we have a barbecue there. We have a cage. We take the tanks and we put the tanks away every night so nobody can access it. So I would suggest we look at fire safety. I'll talk to them. Maybe we can put something on the website to answer the question, but it's really, it's how you store your propane. And it's not just a requirement for us. If something terribly goes wrong with the propane at your business, it's really going to be impacting your insurance probably too, because they're going to say, did you store the propane safely? So it's a bigger question. It really may take putting the tanks in some sort of special place, and storing them inside the restaurant may not be the answer as well under the safety regulations. So really, I think we'll talk. I'll take this one back. I'll talk to Andrew Von Holt, who's the deputy chief in charge of fire safety, and I'll see if we can engage him to put something more informative on the website.
That's great. Thank you. I'm going to sneak in one last question. Going rogue, everyone. I'm sorry. There's a question that just came up about live music on the patio and what would be permitted there. So I see Paul shaking his head. No. So what are the rules there? You're breaking my heart, Paul. What are the rules?
You know what? Outside of a good Irish end of the evening chant, maybe as people walk out, that's as good as it gets.
Okay.
Right now, live music's not permitted to take place for performers, etc. Louise, do you want to speak to that a little?
Yeah, and just so that people understand why. The intent is not to wreck fun and so on. As the music gets louder, people have to talk louder, and because of that, it people have to exhale further. And so what it means is any droplets that are being exhaled are being exhaled further, increasing the likelihood of spread of COVID. So we're not doing it for no reason. There is documented evidence that the louder the volume is and the louder that people have to talk, the wider the droplets go.
That makes absolute sense.
No.
So lastly, maybe let's end on Louise for you. Restaurant workers, everyone was able to get vaccinated as of last week. And I think today it was 18 plus. Any directions to people on suggestions on where to find or make their appointments for vaccines as we're planning to reopen?
So the best place to go for information about vaccination is our website. There are a number of clinics across the region of Peel. There are pop-up clinics. There are clinics being offered through the hospitals. Pharmacies are offering clinics. So lots of opportunity to get vaccinated. It's one of our clearest ways out of the COVID pandemic. And I strongly encourage people to make the decision to vaccinate and to make that appointment and go and get your vaccine. But anything vaccine related, there's tons of information on our website, and would direct anybody there to get the information that they're looking for. And thank you for putting it in the chat box.
It's our pleasure. I had the privilege and the luck of getting vaccinated in the city of Brampton this weekend. I'm feeling very grateful to all of you for the work that you're doing. And thank you to both of you for taking the time out today to have this important conversation. I think we're all trying to just navigate the way out of this and how to do it safely and how to do it properly and within the laws. And I know it's ever changing, and the stressors on your teams and departments are ever increasing. So thank you for all the work that you're doing. Thank you for sharing this information with us. We hope that you attending have found it helpful. There will be we are recording this webinar, and it will be shared with the city of Brampton, and they'll distribute it to all registrants as soon as it's ready. So thank you all for coming.
Paul's got one more thing to add.
Yeah.
I have to get it in. And I can tell you, and it's really unbiased from my perspective, the community in Brampton, Brampton, the businesses, the community, etc. Our mayor, and I see him and I hear him continually say that. Let's support our community in any way we can. Let's do the most we can for them as quickly as we can do for them. And he continually says that. I hear it, every director, every commissioner. We all know that we're going to do the best we can for you. And he's the driver of that. So you should appreciate that.
That's amazing. Thank you, Paul. Well, thank you both so much. Thank you for attending. Enjoy this sunny day that's out in front of you, and we'll be in touch soon. Stay safe, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.